We discover that 100 years ago, a meteor from another world crashed into the demon realm. A terrifying creature then says that although the young man toyed with that realm using his strange power, this is where his journey ends. It asks what wish brought the young man all the way there. The protagonist replies that it was the wish to return to the place he once called home. Mocking him, the great dragon says that for someone who risked his life to challenge it, that wish is insignificant. Even more so because the young man knew he could never achieve it even before he arrived there. Because the dimensional orb that allows travel between dimensions is inside his heart. Smiling, the young man asks if the creature has any idea how much he had to suffer to find it. He then reveals that he has already been in that cursed world for 100 years. Preparing to strike, the dragon says that in that case, he should consider himself lucky because his insignificant existence ends here. Proving otherwise, the protagonist says he can finally bring things to an end as his body radiates a powerful light, which ends up frightening the great dragon. Confused, the creature asks what that disturbing light is and why the young man's wounds are healing. Looking closer, the dragon concludes that it's no ordinary healing ability. Fully regenerated, the protagonist asks if the monster will remove the dimensional orb on its own or if he'll have to rip it out. With wide eyes, the creature realizes it's not dealing with an ordinary warrior. But suddenly, something strikes it, making it spit out black goo from its mouth. Grabbing what he needs, our boy apologizes and says he's waited long enough, not even giving the dragon a chance to react. After the attack, the great beast simply collapses to the ground. Minsu, hunter and healer, observes the glowing item. Fry asks if he spent 100 years just to destroy a damn demon Dragon Ball. Telling him to shut up, the protagonist absorbs the dimensional orb. After a few minutes, what appears to be a large portal opens beneath his feet. Smiling, he says he's finally going home, to his disciples and his younger brother, who are on planet Earth. After a long journey, he awakens in the middle of a forest. Startled, the protagonist sits up abruptly, then calls out for Free. Fry asks if the boy wants food and says he's busy vomiting in his stomach from motion sickness. Getting to his feet, the protagonist tells him to just digest it already. Fry asks if he's sure since the result might not be very pleasant. The boy tells him to shut up before he ends up vomiting too. Then asks if this is Earth since the landscapes vary depending on the location. With a hand on his chin, the protagonist says the man of flow feels similar to being inside a portal. But suddenly he realizes something is wrong. Fry asks if he was a fraud all along, yelling. Minsu says this can't be happening again, referring to the fact that he's now at only 20% of his strength due to a side effect of dimensional travel. A mysterious voice then says the boy had better recover quickly before he gets kicked out. The protagonist says it's not that simple as last time it took him decades to fully recover. Frey's outraged, but our boy says his abilities can still be used. In another part of the forest, we see a frightened girl who lost track of her companions while fleeing for her life. She wonders why the hell there's an orifice early in the dungeon. Screaming for help, the girl ends up tripping on a rock and falling flat on her face. Looking back, she braces for death. But suddenly, Minsu appears and, after taking down the creature, says he has a question to ask. He then asks if this is Earth. Terrified, the girl says yes. Quickly, the protagonist discovers he's in Korea in the year 2037. Thinking aloud, he says he was sucked into another dimension in 2027. Which means 100 years in the demon realm equals only 10 years on Earth. Curious, our boy asks who the president is. Confused, the girl says it's Troy D-Soo. Annoyed, the protagonist asks if she's talking about the brute with one missing eye scaring the girl again. We find out that Minsu and Troyud do not have a good relationship. He then questions whether there really was no one better for the job, while the girl wonders if she's living in one of those regression stories. Unbothered, the protagonist asks if they're inside a portal. Smiling, the girl says that this is the inside of the tutorial tower which appeared a few years ago and functions as a portal for hunters. If someone completes the tower, they can awaken their abilities and gain new skills. And the higher their ranking, the better the guilds they can join. Stretching, Minsu asks if he just needs to clear the tower to leave. The girl says yes, but it takes at least 8 weeks, unless he's really skilled like Ryowan, who cleared the place in 3 weeks and is considered a genius. The protagonist takes a deep breath. Suddenly, a massive striped tiger appears in front of them. Intrigued, the girl wonders if that's really a troll tiger, then says they need to run. After thinking for a moment, our boy says 3 weeks is far too long and that his mana flow is slow, which is making his body not move the way it should. Shouting, the hunter asks if the academy didn't teach him to run when facing a troll tiger. Showing he's not the type to run, Minsu strikes the tiger without even turning around and says that 5 days should be enough to clear the tower. Elsewhere, someone informs Min's son, master of the Empire Guild, that a hunter has just exited the tutorial tower. Surprised, the man says that's not bad since it's only been 8 weeks since the hunters entered. The girl in front of him then says the problem is that the person wasn't on the original entry list. There's no record proving they even entered the tower, and now the young man is causing trouble outside. Upon seeing a photo of Minsalu, Min's stun widens his eyes, showing that he knows our boy very well. We return to the girl who was with the protagonist in the forest, clearly shocked. In her thoughts, she wonders how it's even possible for the guy to have cleared the tutorial tower in 5 days. A message appears saying that the status analysis and skill compatibility process is beginning. But suddenly another message pops up saying the process failed and that the portal is opening. Sumu gets ready to leave while the girl stays behind still in disbelief. Realizing he's about to leave her, she shouts for them to go together. But the protagonist can only think that he's finally in Su. On the other side of the portal, a man speaks with the pair. A buff guy asks what all the commotion is about, and a younger man behind him says the portal opened, but something seems off. Rolling his eyes, the muscular man says he remembers seeing the short-haired girl on the entry list. And approaching, he asks, "What's going on?" The young man who is speaking with the dude then says the guy who came out of the portal wasn't listed on the entry list. Thinking to himself, the leader of Team 2 wonders how the guy cleared the tower and came out without a scratch despite being scrawny. Shoving the man in the tie aside, the buff guy says he'll handle the situation, then asks who the protagonist is and why he's not on the list. Su replies that it's because he didn't enter through the portal. Yelling, the buff man asks how he came out of the entrance without going in through it. Our boy simply says that's just how it happened. Annoyed, the Team 2 leader says someone clearly has no respect for their superiors and placing his hand on the hunter's head says he knows the guy awakened some stealth skill and is just messing around, but he better stop if he doesn't want to die. Getting no answer, he asks if the guy wants to have his face ripped off right there. Laughing, Su tells the man to shut his mouth and stop blowing that breath in his face, then says that since he mentioned ripping his face off, he should stop talking and come at him as long as he breathes as little as possible so his bad breath doesn't reach him. Hearing that enrages the Team 2 leader cursing at the protagonist, he gets ready to throw a punch. Still smiling, our boy says he already told the man to shut up, then asks if he's deaf or something. Sometime later, we see Saigon and the girl beside him completely speechless because both the muscular guy and his team are on the ground after getting completely beaten up. The guy in the tie appears and says that the person he reported earlier got into a fight with the security team and then vanished. Turning around, the guild leader asks if there's any footage from the security cameras that captured the culprit. Quickly, the young man shows footage of the exact moment the commotion started. He says that in just a few seconds, the guy took down 5 hunters and vanished, probably using some kind of stealth ability. Disagreeing, the guild master says that actually the young man moves incredibly fast. While thinking to himself that this person really is Su, who apparently hasn't changed at all in 10 years. After a few minutes of silence, Sai asks for a wanted notice to be issued and says that once they find the young man, they should just say his name and bring him to him. Everyone sets off to begin the search while the guild master wonders what the hell happened to the boy during all that time and where he might be headed now that he's back. Suddenly, he spots the huntress who exited the portal with the protagonist. Nervously, the young woman says she didn't do anything inside the tower because the mysterious guy handled everything. Smiling, Saijun says that since she came out faster than expected, she must have earned some decent skills. A bit shy, the girl says she received an A rank ability. Without wasting time, the man asks why she doesn't just stay and sign a contract with the Empire Guild. Hearing this makes the girl explode with joy. She says that doing so would be an honor for her family. Suddenly, someone shows up and says the guild might be called Empire, but they act like bandits. Turning around, the team leader asks the person to watch what they say. Smiling, Ryu Juan, S-rank hunter of the Jungang Guild, says he didn't mean to offend and that the young man is very meticulous. Koi Samuel, S-rank hunter from the White Lion Guild, says that apparently everyone came after being contacted by the association, then asks if those men on the ground were wiped out by the unregistered awakened. Seeing the state of the security team leader, the gray-haired hunter says that whoever did this is clearly a troublemaker. Agreeing choices. They need to find the boy quickly as he might possess a high-level ability, making him a potential elite talent. Ryu suggests that whoever finds the boy first should have the right to claim him regardless of what shady methods they use. Suspicious, Sai just stares at the hunter. Koi says that in that case, each of them will search on their own while keeping the others informed. Walking away, the gay-haired hunter says he'll make a call once he finds the boy. Annoyed, the Empire Guild Master says as if that's ever going to happen. Leaving the Empire Guild headquarters, Ryu tells Jinsik to gather all the sea and dank hunters from Jungang to form search teams. Curious, the blue-haired young man asks who the hunter wants to find. Turning with a smile, he says it's Min Saigon's younger brother. Elsewhere, Fry asks Sue why the first place he goes after returning to Earth is a shop that only sells fried chicken. But after trying a piece, the mysterious being asks if that's the legendary golden fried bird and begs to eat more. After devouring it happily, he asks the protagonist where they're going now. Our boy says there's only one place to go, his home. After a few hours, he arrives at a small, simple-looking house and quickly enters through the wooden gate. He remembers how he used to be warmly welcomed there by his father, who always complained that he was late, and by his mother, who greeted him with food while asking him to call his brother. Both of them would come running excited for dinner. But now his home is a mess, full of cobwebs and scattered bottles. That sight does nothing to lift the protagonist's mood. In silence, he sits on the porch thinking about how he still can't remember his parents' faces, and how for some people forgetting is a gift from God. But for him, it was a curse. We learn that after 100 years in the demon realm, with his human senses weakening and his body trapped in time, Sue felt like he would be erased by the curse of forgetting. That's why he clung desperately to his memories of his younger brother and his disciples, so that his life wouldn't become just a distant memory, and that's what kept him alive for a century. Free says the boy's house feels lonely, and that the place they lived in the demon realm was cozier. Getting up, our boy says there's no fried chicken in the other world, instantly ending the creature's argument. The protagonist then says that either way, he only stopped by to take a look. Then asks if now's the time to start looking for the kids to see if they're all doing well after 10 years, including Saigon. Suddenly, someone yells. We see that Sue is surrounded by hunters. Ambon introduces himself as a C-rank hunter from the Jane Guild and asks if the guy knows how long they've been looking for him. Staring at him, the protagonist asks if he's expecting a pat on the back. The hunter repeats the name of the guild he belongs to, but our boy says he only cares about what he wants. Annoyed, Ambon asks if he's going to have to make him crawl over to him. Smirking, Sue says that actually suits him, then states that apparently even gorillas are becoming hunters these days. Activating his power, the red-haired man tells his team they'd better teach the guy a lesson before bringing him in. He quickly charges in and lands a solid hit. The punch sends our boy flying until his body crashes hard into a wall. Laughing, Ambon asks who the kid was calling a gorilla. Everyone starts laughing and says the guy passed out before even pulling his hand out of his pocket. Looking at the information on the attacker's lightning ability, Sue asks Fry if he wants to eat that. Fry says it's the first ability he's seen since arriving on Earth. He'd love to try it. Standing up, our boy says it's fine. Noticing how fast the guy is suddenly moving past him, the red-haired hunter asks what's going on, but gets slammed with a heavy hit before getting an answer. His face is smashed into the ground, leaving the rest of the guild members stunned. Without hesitation, the protagonist releases Fry, causing a strange symbol to appear on the ground. Once the process is complete, we find out the skill extraction was successful. Free says that wasn't bad at all, even if it tasted worse than chicken. One of the guild members starts grinding his teeth, clearly furious, then orders the others to attack south. Our boy realizes this is the perfect moment to test the ability he just extracted. As he activates it, Fry says he gets the idea. Multiple rapid strikes are unleashed in succession, making one of the guild guys realize he's completely screwed before even finishing his attack. As expected, the protagonist lands a kick that makes the guy cough up strawberry juice. We find out SUA used a skill called Vital Point Strike, which works even better with a weapon. And after picking up a knife from the guy he just dropped, he says that even though the blade is dull, he'll give a test. Suddenly, someone calls out to our boy. He pauses mid-strike to see who's interrupting him. To his surprise, he finds himself face to face with none other than his younger brother, who starts smiling with tears in his eyes while the protagonist stands there in disbelief, still holding the knife. We learn that 20 years ago, gates opened to a peaceful land and the world was thrown into chaos. Monsters began appearing everywhere along with first-generation awakened individuals possessing unimaginable powers. Since there were no laws in place to handle the situation, barbarism ruled for a long time. And because of that chaos, Sue and Sjun lost their parents and had to survive on their own to the point that the protagonist had to drop out of school to become a hunter since he was a first-generation awakened. We see young Sjun asking if his brother isn't going to school. He replies no, he has to work. Lowering his head, the little boy asks if it's all his fault, but our boy says he's just really bad at studying, so he chose his career early. Worried, the boy with glasses asks when he'll be back. Smiling, the protagonist simply says he'll return soon. Back to the present, Sue is amazed at how beautiful his younger brother's house is. Taking the chance to touch everything at the door, the boy with glasses says he earned money using the skills he learned from him. then reveals that he bought that house so they could live together and that there's a reserved space inside. Happy, the protagonist says he can finally raise his little brother who worked so hard all this time. Saijun says it was the protagonist who did all the hard work, and now he's sure it really is his brother. Getting straight to the point, he asks where the protagonist has been during these 10 years. Our boy then tells the young man to take a seat because he has 100 years of story to tell. After getting cozy and eating, the younger brother says that to summarize, 10 years ago, the guy defeated the fourth demon lord and was transported to another dimension by an artifact the creature possessed. So for 100 years, he grew stronger with that ability and searched for dragons with dimensional magic until he reached the Dragon King, who after being defeated released the dimensional orb that allowed him to return to Earth. Confirming that's exactly what happened, Sue says the predator came with him too and is now inside his body. Shocked, Saigon asks if that's some kind of possession. But our boy says Free is more like a parasite and that even if it all sounds ridiculous, young man shouldn't think he's gone insane. The guy with glasses says he believes him given the world they live in and that it's enough just to have his brother back. Looking at information about Dao, Sue says it's now his brother's turn to explain what happened in the country during the past 10 years that allowed a guy like that to become president. Saigon says the man took credit for defeating the fourth Demon King, so he received the title of the greatest first-generation hunter, which allowed him to reach the presidency. Frustrated, the guy with glasses says he can't even imagine what Dao will do when he finds out his brother is back. Our boy asks if the guys who attacked him earlier are the president's lackeys. But his younger brother shakes his head and says there are 7 representative guilds in South Korea, collectively known as the Heptagram. Those being the Empire Guild, the Infinity Guild, the Yungang Guild, the White Line Guild, the Warrior Fighter Guild, the Blue Flower Guild, and the Frozen Soul Guild, and that the ones who attacked him are from the Yung Guild led by the Hunter Ryu, someone he'll deal with later. The protagonist then asks about his disciples. Nervously, Sejuan says he hasn't spoken to them in a while, and all he knows is that Shirlong went back home while Kong Yova is now under Cho Disu's control. A bit surprised, Sue asked about Minjin, only to find out that he died. In disbelief, our boy demands to know who was responsible. The guy with glasses says the boy's body disappeared, so they never found the culprit. But the only ones capable of killing a hunter are other hunters or unregistered awakened individuals. The problem is, even the HMCS couldn't find any clues. Confused, the protagonist asks what HMCS is. Pulling out his laptop, Sean says it's a special investigation unit that operates on the front lines of crimes against hunters. With the authority to investigate and arrest all awakened criminals, our boy asks if his brother has any connections inside the organization. He says yes, but it will be better for him not to get involved in dangerous stuff and just use their guild's intel team instead. After thinking for a bit, the protagonist says he doesn't just need information. Concerned, the guy with glasses says the organization deals with all kinds of criminals, and it's way too soon to go there. Determined, Sue says he spent 100 years fighting in another world, which means he's seen and done all sorts of things. Swallowing hard, the Empire Guild leader says he forgot what his brother's nickname used to be, then says he'll contact Yeji from the Frozen Soul Guild to arrange a meeting. Thinking to himself, he wonders what exactly happened to Sue in that other world. Suddenly, Sue calls out and says he recognizes the face on the screen. Getting closer, Sejuan says that's the team leader from the Gangbuk district, Jonggu, and asks how the boy knows the man. 2 days later, at HMCS headquarters, a man yells that in any case, those 2 guys are from the second generation. A young man asks what happened, and the Gangbuk team leader says a rookie was just added to his team. The young man is left speechless while the older man complains that things were different back in his day, and for the 10th time, tells the story of how he was a rookie and took a fatal hit just when the group was on the verge of losing a lot of power. But a healer with incredible abilities appeared and saved him. Suddenly, Sue bursts into the room with a kick to the door, startling both the man and the young guy. Then asks why he changed his name if it only confuses people. Without waiting for an answer, the protagonist asks if the man remembers the person who saved him once, leaving the team leader absolutely speechless. Sometime later, we see the man introducing the protagonist to the rest of the team. He then says that since the guy is new there, he may need information, which should be given to him immediately, and that he must be treated with the utmost respect. A green-haired girl says it's kind of contradictory for Jonggu to be acting that way, but the guy next to her tells her to shut up. Suddenly, the brown-haired man calls for Kim's son, who jumps in surprise. The leader then says it's time to introduce the new recruit to the others, while some of the younger members wonder if Sue is a 3-star hunter. Inside the room, Jang Woo asks if our boy would like some coffee. He says yes. A bit nervous, Kim, who is the data manager of the Gangbuk team, asks what exactly she's supposed to tell the new recruit. The protagonist says he'd like to see the records of all hunters who were killed over the past 20 years. Kim tries to say that the request is unfeasible due to the amount of data, but the team leader cuts her off, saying she should stop making excuses and handle the task. With no choice, the data manager asks if he's only referring to humans. Drinking his coffee, the protagonist says that officially recognized murder cases by the HMCS are valid, too, also including a list of hunter-killers. Thinking aloud, he says killing an awakened is nearly impossible unless the attacker has equal strength. And since Min Jin was high-level, it means his killer was a professional. Kim asks where she should send the requested information, and the protagonist tells her to just send it to his phone for now. Suddenly, a young man enters the room and informs Junggu that a territorial war has broken out between gangs that also have awakened members. So, the police have asked for help. The man asks why the officers can't handle a handful of Leak Awakened. But the young man says one of them is Kbaris. Curious, Sue asks who that is. The manager explains that Kbaris is on a completely different level from other guilds and is accused of being involved in hunter trafficking. Interested, our boy asks Junggu, formerly Bangu, to take him along. Putting on his uniform, the man says that even if he changed his name, if the boy prefers Jangu, then that's his name again. He then states that the kid should at least get some training first since he's still a rookie. Meanwhile, at the scene of the conflict, someone says the fuel captain of Bloodless Reaper isn't that impressive. It's Kong Ho, vice leader of Kbaris. Next to him, a young man says the man is absolutely right. Jakin, third in command of the gang, says that's kind of unfair to say, considering half of the opposition got wrecked by his cleaver. Laughing, the man tells him that if he feels left out, he should focus on beating him. Jen says he'll do that someday. Kong then says it's a good thing he quit being a hunter, otherwise they'd all be in trouble. He then declares that from this day forward, that place belongs to Kbaris, but suddenly a huge explosion erupts. On the ground, Jakin yells, asking if anyone from the gang they defeated is still alive. Wearing his Hunkus uniform, Sue tries to remember the name of the other group. Furious, the red-haired guy asks if his brother killed someone from the organization, but Sue says that doesn't matter now. Our boy appears and says that judging by how Kong was talking, he must have killed some hunters. So, he got to see more what he can do. Injured, the Kbaris members say they've never seen the boy in Gangbuck before and ask what they should do now. Nervous, the vice leader says that if the intruder asks to see something, then they'd better show it. He activates his full body armor ability and orders everyone to attack. Suddenly, Kong is transported to another place where someone appears to be on the other side of the river. Looking closer, he realizes it's his grandfather and asks if he's calling him over or telling him to leave. We see that it's all just an illusion and that the Kbaris leader is actually on the ground. A hand grabs his hair and tells him to wake up. Crouched, Sue says he's the only one left. He then asks Free to feed. Excited, the parasite says he can't wait to taste that ability. Badly beaten, Kong asks why the guy is there and says that no matter what he wants to know, they've never killed a hunter. Smiling, the protagonist says he knows that weaklings like them wouldn't be capable of something like that. The young man then asks why all of this happened, explaining, our boy says he wanted to see how strong awakened criminals are nowadays and took the chance to stop them. Jenga shows up and asks if Sue is okay, saying he was worried when the boy insisted on going alone, but now sees that was unnecessary. The protagonist says he figured they'd need at least one leader alive, so he spared Kong and killed the rest. The team leader says the priority was capturing them, but if they attack first, then it's fine. That's why they usually use body cams. In his thoughts, the man wonders if it was truly necessary. Our boy says he forgot about the camera since he's still new, then asks if the man will cover for him. With not much of a choice, he says yes. Stugu starts walking out and casually comments that in any case he was hit first. Lying, Jangu says he believes him. Neither of them notices that one member of the group besides Kong actually escaped. The guy quickly calls someone and explains what happened. When he hears that Jakin is dead, G, an A-rank hunter from the Red Guild, Hong Kong, asks the caller to repeat the last part. Next, we see him leaving the airport with two other men after being informed that the target entered the country. Junyong from Korea's Hunter Association approaches and offers his condolences for Jakin's death. Go asks where his brother is. The man with glasses says he's at the Hunter Forensics Department and that once the body is confirmed, the hunter can head to his accommodations. Smiling, the red-haired man says that sounds suspicious, then claims he heard the one who killed his brother is affiliated with Amos's. The security officer says he can't comment on anything related to the matter. Irritated, the A-rank hunter asks if he can leave the facility outside the designated hours. Junyong says no, and if he does, he'll be deported and face disciplinary action among other penalties. With no real options, Jur complains about the guy saying all that and walking away, then calls out for Ryu, who promptly responds. The hunter tells Ryu, a B+ rank hunter, to track down those responsible while thinking to himself that he's going to rip out the heart of whoever killed his brother. We return to Sue, who asks Saigon if all of the boy's belongings were truly taken. Confirming, the man says that after Minjun's murder, his home was completely searched as they needed to find any mana traces from the culprit. Our boy then asks if it couldn't have just been a robbery gone wrong, since if he looks at the list of stolen items, most were valuable, and the messiness increases the odds that evidence was left behind. Which means if erasing mana traces had been the goal, setting the place on fire and burning everything would have been the better option. Stein asks if his brother is suggesting that someone took the opportunity to rob the house after the boy was killed. The protagonist says yes, and that apparently they'll need to dismantle a few gangs. The guy with glasses says finding anything is impossible. But our boy smiles and says they won't know that unless they try. Elsewhere, he wonders why he said that so confidently and why there's so many thieves in such a small country. So much so that it's been a week and he's found nothing. Free says he'll help and tells him to turn right, but Sue runs straight into a dead end and gets furious. Suddenly, a conversation catches his attention. As he gets closer, he hears a man talking about how AMCS has been cracking down aggressively on the gangs since they have investigative authority over hunters worldwide. The older man beside him says they're all just government dogs, so all they have to do is kill everyone in the nonsense, especially since any skilled hunter would rather join a guild. Concerned, the brown-haired man says that since they specialize in stolen hunter goods, maybe they should relocate the warehouse. The protagonist appears and says it's time for the place to be confiscated. The guy with huge teeth says this must be the guy causing chaos among the gangs. While the man with a mustache calls for reinforcements, our boy says he's busy and unless they want to die, they'd better tell him where the warehouse is. Reinforcements arrive quickly and ask what's going on. Furious, the chubby guy says the boy has no idea what he's gotten himself into. That even if he's from HMCS, they could just bury him in concrete and dump him in the ocean and no one would ever find him. Without taking his hands out of his pockets, the protagonist says it's really thoughtful of them to gather like this just to help him out. He then tells Free it's time to use his skill. The Paraset replies that to do that he'll need some chicken. Smiling, Sue agrees to the trade. The light radiating from our boy's body nearly blinds the criminals who are then hit by a move called Shockwave. The attack blasts everything away, including the men. As he approaches, our boy asks if they're ready to show him the warehouse. With tears in his eyes, Hansen asks who the hell the young man is. Grinning like a maniac, the protagonist says he's just a lunatic. A few hours later, inside the warehouse, Fry says they're only there because he gave the directions. Sue responds that the parasite just got lucky as he holds the item he wanted so badly. It's Minjun's research journal sealed with a magical lock that can't be opened unless the owner's mana is used. Fry asks how he plans to read the notebook, but the protagonist says he's only interested in the mana on the pages. Taking out his phone, he decides to call Byongu to report that he has a dozen awakened criminals tied up and under his custody, so the man should come by car since after all this, they still need to go somewhere. It's revealed that there's a neutral battlefield zone where underground techniques and bizarre abilities are traded. This place is inside a market that sells everything related to abilities called Black Skyfall. Inside, we see a woman sitting in front of a spread of cards. Picking one up, she smiles and says that apparently an interesting guest is on the way. Walking through the city, Samu says not much has changed compared to 10 years ago. Free comments that the boy seems to be famous since everyone is staring at him and asks if he can grab a bite. Declining, the protagonist says this is a neutral combat zone. Someone suddenly appears and says it's been a while since they've seen the young man. It's Mum Yong, a shaman and one of the 12 bosses of Black Skyfall. Smiling, the woman says she's been expecting him. Inside, she remarks that the protagonist hasn't changed at all in 10 years. Curious, he says the same about her. The shaman then asks what he's been doing for the last 10 years that kept him from reaching out. Handing over Minjun's journal, our boy says it's a long story, and rather than explaining, he'd like to know if she can extract the mana from the notebook. Myeonum smiles and says as usual, he's still very direct. She then says she'll do as he asked. Picking up a knife from the table, Sue cuts his own hand. We learn that mana is used through skills or magic, and reverting it to its original form is nearly impossible. It's like making curry. You can remove solid ingredients like carrots and potatoes, but you can't separate curry powder from the water once it's dissolved, nor return the ingredients to their original state. But the shaman can do it using her ability called Mana Hacker, an illegal method that challenges causality and defies the laws of nature. That's why abilities like hers are often linked to criminal activity and why society sees the woman with suspicion. Smiling, Nomong says it's done and adds that Sue's strawberry juice tastes surprisingly good. Fry is horrified. The protagonist grabs the woman's wrist and, thanking her for the compliment, says it's on the house. The shaman asks if he's leaving already, but our boy says he still has things to do. With no choice, the woman says the guy is really mysterious. In the car, the parasite says he never wants to go back there again. The protagonist asks why he's being so picky. Fry says the boy and the woman are both degenerates, but Sumu says he just made a small cut on his hand, then says it's time to head to the Institute of Ancient History Research. Arriving at the location, he says this is where Minjun was murdered. The parasite claims this is trespassing, but our boy says the building belongs to the Empire Guild and was purchased and preserved by Saigon, who also seems to be struggling to accept the young man's death. Placing his hand on the table, the protagonist says he needs to see the memories from that fateful day. Free asks if he's really going to use that. Su says ease and then activates his ability called Mana Remembrance to experience the emotions felt by the owner of the mana in a specific place. Quickly, we see Minjun with a hooded man. The Paris complains about not being able to see things clearly, but our boy says that's just how it works. After all, it's only possible to experience the target's emotions, thinking to himself. He says Minjun was never a weak hunter, which means the culprit is highly skilled. Near the image of the young man, Siwei tries to understand what could have happened. He asks if it was the work of an order. Suddenly, the hooded man gets closer and asks Minjin to speak louder. Thinking to himself, our boy wonders if his disciple was also part of some organization. Fry asks if he's okay. Ever since arriving in the demon realm, he constantly spoke about Sajin and the disciples he had, even looking for them the moment he stepped back onto Earth. And now he just saw Minjin die before his own eyes. Confused, Su asks where Free learned so many words. Without answering, the parasite says he can feel Su's emotions surging violently to the point of nausea. The protagonist says he's fine and that after 100 years, he was bound to break eventually. Suddenly, Yampang appears and asks if he's Su, then states that the fact the boy wandered around all day made everything very difficult, as someone is dying to see him. Crossing his arms, our boy says that apparently there are 6 little rats who want to see him. Narrowing his eyes, the hunter says he'll give the boy 2 choices. The first is to let them tie him up and take him, or the second, resist and be attacked. Choosing the first, Su says it's better than being attacked. Ryu asks another group member to tie the boy up, but when the young man approaches, he ends up receiving a fatal blow. Smiling, the protagonist says he actually prefers the second option. Furious, the Red Guild hunter says he'll kill him, but someone appears and tells him to stop. With hatred in his eyes, Jay says he'll take it from here because the prey is his. Still smiling, Somo says this is going to be fun. Before doing anything, the guild leader asks if the protagonist is alone and if he was really the one who killed Jaken, his brother. Scratching his neck, our boy says he's not sure. He doesn't usually ask the name of trash before cleaning it up. Hearing that makes the red-haired man even angrier to the point he charges straight into the attack, declaring that he'll make the boy regret being born. Rushing, just strikes the first blow, but it's blocked by Su, who asks if he's an A rank. The hunter realizes the young man is a healer and attacking again, says he's nothing but an arrogant brat. Seeing the man blocked again, the other hunters decide to join the fight, but the protagonist suddenly appears in front of them and says he can't let them interfere. Using his lightning ability, he takes the guy down all at once and excited, and says it's been a while since things were this interesting. Everyone starts wondering who the boy is while GE thinks about how he analyzed his movements. After all, none of the speed-type hunters he met in the portal showed that level of precision, which means he'll have to go all out right away. Grabbing one of the guild members by the neck, Su says that if a crime is committed by someone's brother or son, that person must face the punishment. But they prefer to feel wronged, even while being criminals. Furious, Stud asks if he's saying that all criminals deserve to die, then declares that his brother had no choice but to become a criminal to feed him. So the only sinner there is himself, and he must pay with his own life. Screaming, the hunter attacks with his heavenly attack with wolf fangs. Calmly, Su says he won't be able to dodge the strike with a single movement and asks Free to activate an ability. The parasite says he's exhausted, but our boy tells him to activate it one last time. Free agrees, and quickly the protagonist manages to use the neutralize ability, which nullifies the opponent's attributes. Gu realizes what's happening and is left speechless. Shocked, Yampang wonders how the boy has such a high ability capable of nullifying a rank a hunter's skill. About to attack, the protagonist asks the red-haired man what would happen if everyone facing hardship decided to become a criminal, then states that he's clearly outdated. With the blow, Gert is sent flying, but manages to stay on his feet. The other members get worried, but the hunter orders everyone to stay out of the fight. In launching another attack, he thinks to himself that he will win through close combat. Since the boy will eventually run out of mana, Su quickly jumps to protect himself. Grabbing Go by the hair, he says the man better not even think about doing that. Punching the hunter in several spots, he asks if the man will take responsibility if the building collapses. Since he prefers to keep using abilities without caring, the red-haired guy continues the attack. Our boy is sent flying as Gu tells Ryu to tie him up, activating his ability. The guild member says he's confused since the man keeps changing his mind about whether he wants help. Chains appear around the protagonist's body, charging him with full fury. Just says he'll blow Sue up so badly he won't be able to heal. Removing the chains, our boy says congratulations for following in his brother's footsteps. He then attacks with an ability called Life Drain, which absorbs the target's life force. In the blink of an eye, the Red Guild leader looks cadaverous. Shaking all over, Yampang asks if that's really a healer's ability. Sue then questions how he could call his first ability that thing, and says that to begin with, he was never a typical healer. Because instead of using mana to restore life force, he always preferred to control his own life energy. Through a process called Life Spirit Sorcery, approaching the braided hunter, he says it's his turn now. Scared, Yampang says he surrenders. Our boy tells him to shut his mouth, and sometime later wonders if he cleaned up everything. He then remembers his body cam, which this time was clipped to his belt. Looking at the device, he asks Bangu if everything was recorded and says that since he was attacked once again, everything that happened was legitimate self-defense. Completely in shock after watching everything on the computer, the team leader says everything looks fine. The only problem is that the boy hit the live button instead of the record button. Elsewhere, someone says the situation has become complicated for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and asks when the HMCS started live, streaming the annihilation of awakened criminals. A man says the feature has existed for 2 years with the goal of creating promotional videos for HMCS. However, the project failed since the organization couldn't produce high-quality footage. Intrigued, the man with glasses asks why someone so talented would join HMCS. But a woman says the current issue is that the person killed in the video was a guest hunter from the Red Guild. Suddenly, someone arrives and apologizes for keeping everyone waiting. It's Troy Du, the president of Korea, who then asks what the problem is. A few days later, in the Empire Guild's cafeteria, Sain asks if Sue is listening to what he's saying. The boy tries to mention the live stream and repeats the question. Our boy says no, he's eating, then says, yes, he's listening. Without letting his brother talk, he asks if he can eat there every day. Saijan says yes and goes back to talking about the live stream, which is the topic of the moment. Sai says that luckily it was a body cam with low-quality footage, so the protagonist's face wasn't clearly visible. But if Dao finds out he's back, there's no telling what he'll do, which means it's better for the boy to stay low-key. Even though the pastry Sue agrees and says he'll do it for him as long as the conversation ends and they eat. After getting fed, the glasses-wearing youth says he's not a kid anymore, but our boy says he'll always be a brat. Other hunters approach the two, and one of them is the girl who is inside the tower with the protagonist. Stajan introduces Shinji, Sue, to his brother, and says she recently joined the Empire Guild. Then asks everyone is gathered because of the joint seminar for new guild hunters. Smiling, Sup confirms and introduces Chu Heyman from the White Lion Guild and Yamato, a hunter from the Frozen Soul Guild. The young man turns to Sue and says he's heard a lot about him, but is only now getting the chance to introduce himself. He then says he's looking forward to working with the protagonist. Smiling, our boy says he's looking forward to working with him too. Budding as the conversation, Shu asks if that's the rookie who stirred up trouble, and says he saw the video of the guy killing Gert, who was kind of his rival, but that he doesn't seem to be the same person from the video. Seek and Shin are shocked by the guy's audacity. Nervously, Sejuan says the hunter is being extremely rude to someone he's just meeting for the first time. Mocking, the guy says he only asked a question, and that as always, the Empire Guild is too uptight. Shotting the boy with glasses says that actually it's the White Lion Guild that should be ashamed for having such a rude member, and that he's dying to know what Sun Nil will say about the situation. Shu says that as a direct disciple of Chao Long, the leader of the Blackwater Lotus would never be intimidated by a threat like that. Eating, Sue watches everything silently because the guy just mentioned the name of one of his disciples. But seeing that things are about to get ugly, he decides to stand up and intervene. He then says that if the guy wants to check if he's really the one from the video, he can go ahead and try since he's dying to see how well his master trained him. Furious, Shu wonders how the boy dares speak of Xiaolong. However, since they're in the Empire Guild's headquarters, he decides not to do anything after kicking a chair. He turns around and tells the protagonist to watch his back at night. Sik apologizes for the whole situation, but Cyan says it's fine and tells him to leave. Turning to the front, he tells our boy that he'll take care of the situation later. Sumu says it's not a problem. After all, the young man is the disciple of one of his own disciples. Elsewhere, someone says Sunil can consider the matter resolved. Drinking his tea, the man says the issue could have been handled with documents, but since he came in person, it's an honor to receive him. The leader of the White Lion Guild says he came because he also needed to apologize for the disrespect shown by one of his guild members toward a rookie from HMCS. Smiling, John Ho, director of HMCS, says there's no need for someone of his status to apologize personally and that he knows he's trying to assess the situation. However, the person he wants to see is currently busy with the task of the prison selecting awakened criminals. Finding disappointment, the White Lion leader says he's sorry to hear that and asks if that type of request is rare. The director says it's rare, but not unheard of before. Such requests were usually handled by large guilds, but apparently things have changed recently. Standing up, Sunil asks if the man would allow Chu to apologize to the boy in person if he can't manage to do it himself. John says yes. After all, the issue was between the two of them. He then wishes the man with glasses a good trip. Leaving the room, the White Lion Guild leader thinks to himself that he won't give up so easily on someone of that caliber. Turning around, he asks his secretary to notify Hunter Chu that he should get ready for a trip. The woman says she understands and asks where she should send him. We're taken to an inn where a guard wonders why the MCS team hasn't arrived yet. Another guard says the team should be here soon. Curious, the chubby one asks what all the fuss is about. It then says the inspection season is always exhausting and that everything would be easier if the criminals just behaved. Looking at Kazier's Volk's file, he says the man suddenly started a rebellion like he'd lost his mind. The younger guard says the criminal was pretty famous in the underworld and that it was tough for the agencies to capture him. We find out the man is about to be transferred to Genwen. Inside the cell, a rat starts talking to Volk, saying the organization has already made its move, and if he wants to get out of there, he needs to cause some kind of trouble inside the prison. Standing outside, some wonders if that's really the awakened prison in Insen. Sometime later, the guard informs Chu that the protagonist just left. Irritated, the guy wonders why prisoner transport has to be so fast. Then realizes the bus was actually right behind him, but now it's too late. Getting into the car, he says that apparently he has no choice but to go to Gang 1. And then he hopes to get paid with overtime included. Inside the bus, Sue enjoys an iced coffee. Suddenly, VOG calls his attention and says watching him drink everything alone is hurting his feelings. Our boy doesn't care. The man then asks if he is the warden of the prison he's being transferred to. Bluntly, the protagonist says no. Vault then says that judging by how comfortable the boy seems beside him, he must be confident in his abilities. Sue returns to him and asks who he is. The prisoner chuckles and says he really is insane, then asks if the boy even knows the reason for his transfer. Our boy asks if he's being transferred because he talks too much. Showing his cuffs, Volk says that he's only wearing them because he turned 5 awakened criminals into meat paste. So, the boy should really be asking why an A++ level awakened criminal is being transferred in a standard transport vehicle alongside an arrogant rookie. Finishing his little speech, the prisoner says he can at least tell him one thing. He's screwed. Suddenly, something causes an explosion and hurls the bus violently into the air. Outside, an old man who looks like a monk and a boy ask whether Volk is dead. Suddenly, the man kicks the door open and steps out of the vehicle. Furious, he asks if the old man was planning to send him to the afterlife as well. Mocking him, the old man says that if the gray wolf of Bestia dies from a little accident like that, then he's become a lapdog. Then asks if he dealt with the escort. He says he kicked the hunter in the temple when the vehicle exploded. So, yes, you could say he did. Impatient, VOG asks if the purple-haired boy could take off his cuffs a little faster, but the boy says only if he wants to lose his wrists. After a few minutes, the chain snaps in half. The prisoner then says he thought he was going to die of boredom. Snapping back, the boy says it's only been a few months since he was imprisoned. Suddenly, someone orders the trio to freeze his Chu, who says he was wondering why Volk chose such a dark, secluded road. He then claims that Sumo can't be anything special if he got taken down by people like them. Getting ready to attack, the guy asks which organization they belong to, unless, of course, they prefer a beating first. The purple-haired boy says he knows the hunter and asks when he started following them. The old man notes that Chu is alone, which gets Volk excited. Annoying, the brown-haired guy tells them to stop whispering and just say who they are. The prisoner asks if he really needs to know since he's going to die anyway. In the blink of an eye, Sarah takes on his wolf form. Nervously, Chu thinks to himself that he needs to defeat the man to force him back to normal. He then activates his ability called Azura Diamond Rage, which covers his entire body in armor. The two charge into battle without hesitation, defending against the blows. Volk realizes that fighting the guy alone would have been a problem. Wu thinks he can feel that he's causing damage, but for some reason, his opponent is still standing. The colonel asks if this is some kind of welcome massage service. Watching the fight, the old man says they don't have time to waste and asks the boy to finish it. Obeying the young man activates his 10-headed viper ability, causing snakes to appear and attempt to restrain Chu, who starts running. Unsuccessfully, he ends up captured. Vol then says the White Lion Guild folks really aren't anything special. After taking a punch, the hunter crashes to the ground while the criminal says that in the back alleys, he's just another loser. Looking up, the brown-haired boy says Volk is getting cocky for someone who needs help to fight one person. The wolf kicks the hunter and tells him to just wait quietly for backup. Suddenly, the old man tells Volk to finish the job. Preparing to strike the fatal blow, the criminal asks if Chu would like to say any last words, though he won't be listening. Thinking, the hunter says it's unbelievable that this is how it ends for him. But luckily, a bright yellow light appears, forcing everyone to leap away for safety. Still tied up, Chu ends up getting hit. Su then asks if it was Sia Long who taught him to give up in front of the enemy. Shocked, the hunter asks how he's even still alive. Activating the camera, the protagonist asks which button he's supposed to press to record. Volk says that's impossible since he crushed the guy's skull before leaving. Also surprised, the old man says the kid was dead and that the boy doesn't have an ordinary ability. Furious, Chu tells the protagonist to wait for backup. After listing all the crimes the trio committed, including disturbing his sacred coffee time, Chu says that by the authority of HMCS, the 3 people present are considered criminals and therefore will pay here and now for their crimes. Still with his back turned, Su tells Chu to stay down and just watch. After all, Asher isn't a skill made only for striking. Charging forward, Vol asks what the hell the protagonist is talking about. But as he gets closer, he receives a punch right in the face instead of an answer. Sending the enemy flying, our boy says that this is a technique designed for piercing. Mouth agape, the White Lion Guild hunter wonders how the boy knows a technique created by Cian. Explaining further, Su says you need to drain the strawberry juice first to properly tenderize the meat. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurs caused by the monk-like old man who used his ability called Maharaga. The problem is our boy managed to dodge it. Showing little reaction, the protagonist says the man truly didn't waste his years of life. Fry asks if he can eat that ability, but Simu says it would be way too costly. Still in shock, Chu asks who the hell our boy is and how he knows his master's technique. Suddenly, the old man activates another ability and tells the protagonist not to move recklessly, unless he wants to see his hunter colleague get crushed. Smiling, Su asks if, while he was busy beating the life out of Vol, the man was planning something behind his back. The monk says it's not a threat, just an agreement. So if the boy releases the wolf, he'll release the hunter as well, and everyone can walk away in silence. Cleaning out his ear, the protagonist says that if he weren't searching for something, he wouldn't have taken on that mission. Besides, Chu can take a beating. Surprised, the old man asks what he means. They're not on the same side. Answering, the protagonist says the only allies here are him and Volk. Getting straight to the point, our boy says he knows the 2 of them are hunter-killers who likely work for a large organization given the curse pools they carry. Preparing to attack, the bald man asks why he came alone if he already knew all this. With a dark look, Su says he's here to find out who they work for. Frightened, the old man tells him not to take another step. Unbothered, the protagonist activates his shockwave ability, which ends up overloading the old man's cursed tool. Backing away, he thinks that should be impossible with a normal human's mana density. Thinking to himself, Su says he's already 40% restored, which means proper warm-ups are having a bigger effect than he expected. Growing impatient, he tells the old man to stop wasting time. He doesn't have many years left anyway. Showing he won't give up, the man asks if the boy really thinks he'll make them talk so easily, even knowing that anyone affiliated with an organization signs a silence pact, which is sealed with the Signer's mana. Vog finally regains consciousness, and the old man asks if he's recovered his strength. Smiling, the protagonist asks if this is all because they're afraid of dying, then says if that's the case, they don't need to worry. Just die a few more times, and they'll get used to it. Realizing things are about to get ugly, the bald man screams at Volk to do something. Furious, he says he gets it, and charging and declares that even if it kills him, he'll destroy the boy. Suddenly, Chu appears and says that no, he won't. Wiping his mouth, the hunter says that now they'll finally fight on equal footing. Vog says he should have stayed down instead of getting involved, but Chu says that this is where the fun begins. Su activates his ability called 1,000 Winds, causing tornadoes of light to appear and swirl around the enemies, lifting them off their feet, grabbing the old man by the neck. Our boy asks what it feels like to be on the brink of death. Unable to break free, the monk just makes strange noises. Su then asks how long it'll take until he's ready to answer his questions. With drool dripping from his mouth, the old man asks what the boy is. The protagonist says that apparently once isn't enough, while Chu thinks the whole thing is insane because the boy is slowly healing the enemy before he dies with a ridiculously overpowered healing ability. Arms crossed, Our boy asks for the third time who the man works for. Exhausted, Volk begs the old man to just tell him. He finally says the name Bestia. Hearing that makes the protagonist excited. Injured, the monk thinks that before he had his doubts, but now that he's seen the boy's abilities, he's sure that the kid is one of the 3 long-lost legends known as Mad Dog. Approaching our boy says that now that their mounts are working, it's time for a little chat, because he needs to know who the snake-like member is. We learn that there's a group of elite hunter-killers whose leader is named Crow. In that world, they have significant influence both in skill and in the number of contracts. That's why the old man, a first-generation hunter who had stayed hidden in the shadows, had no reason to refuse the organization's invitation. But for assassins within the group, secrecy about fellow members is a fundamental rule, which means that until their heads roll, loyalty is the organization's highest commandment. In his thoughts, the bald man says that in all 15 years as a member, he never imagined he would betray the group. But after experiencing true death multiple times, his lips began moving on their own. Out loud, he says that the person in the image is a member of Bestia named Black Mamba. Our boy finds the name interesting, then says he has one more question because he needs to know if the duo was involved in the assassination order for Hunter Minjan. VOG simply lowers his head as if confirming. Trembling, he thinks about how awful the sensation is. The old man then says that even though they are part of the organization, they are still independent members. They don't know each other's identities or whereabouts, but there's a reason he was sent to retrieve Volk. It's the biannual organizational meeting happening in a week, and the order wants the man to attend. But if Sue wants, they can tell him where it'll take place and even help him because now they want to become his subordinates. Surprise. Shu asks what the hell is going on. And calling the protagonist brother says he can't seriously be considering that offer. Our boy says he's not his brother, but the hunter says that since he used Azura, he must be related to Solomon or maybe even his master's master. So he should accept him as a disciple instead of those two. Stewie tells him to shut up while thinking that all he wants are the details on Black Man. However, his plan leaks to the organization through the do. Things could turn ugly. So, our boy concludes that he'll accept the criminals as his subordinates, leaving Chu in shock happy. The old man says both of them will be loyal and never get in the boy's way. The protagonist says there's one condition. He needs to be sure he won't be betrayed again. So, the two of them must take a mana oath. Outraged, Volk says that contract seals a person's mana core if broken. It's basically a dog collar. The old man tells him to shut up. Activating his power, our boy tells them to gather mana in their cores and speak their names out loud. With no other option, the pair obeys. Excited, Fry says he now has 2 underlings too. Our boy says their reward for loyalty is protection. So, as long as they honor the oath, their lives will be spared. Kneeling, the 2 men say they understand. Throwing a tantrum, Shu says that if the boy won't accept him as a disciple, they'll report all of this to the association. Stu just stares at him with his red eyes, and the hunter quickly says he was only joking. Putting the contract away, the protagonist asks if the meeting is really in 1 week, then says he'll accept Shu as a disciple since he'll need help with what's coming. Hearing that makes the hunter light up with joy. As they head out, Subu thinks that the 4 of them are enough to cause a decent mess, but he'll still need one more person to clean things up. We return to the prison where Volk was held. Furious, the director says it's impossible for a prisoner like that man to have escaped and asks why Agent Cuz didn't handle the situation. Thinking fast, Jungu tries to come up with a good lie. The man then asks why the transport officer didn't show up. The one in charge of the protagonist explains that transport teams usually have 4 to 5 officers, but moving Volk would have required at least 10. Yet, the director only requested 1, not even counting the driver. Angry, the chubby man asks what that has to do with the fact that the prisoner escaped. Jongu says that from what he heard, the new transport officer claimed the prisoner confessed to having high-ranking officers under his control before he escaped, and even if it's hard to believe a criminal's words, this situation needs to be investigated. So, HMCS will conduct an operation both on the escaped prisoner and on the prison itself. Sometime later, our boy's friend enters the room and says that as requested by Sue, the cleanup from the transport mission has been completed and the bribery investigation has also begun. We see that the protagonist is accompanied by Chu, the old man known as Red Ghost, and the escaped prisoner. Panicking, the brown-haired man asks what a criminal is doing there, but Sue tells him to shut up because now they need to plan the operation. Explaining, the protagonist says that the next day, they'll infiltrate the Besha organization's meeting, which includes about 8 high-level awakened assassins, and that the details will be provided by the defectors present. Jungo asks if the boy really plans to infiltrate a group of assassins with such a small team, and what the goal of the mission is. Smiling, our boy says the goal is pretty obvious: extermination. We arrive at the day of the meeting, where one of the members asks what happened to the mandatory attendance rule. Annoyed, the long-haired girl tells him that Volk and Red Ghosts are missing. But the guy says he wasn't counting on them anyway. A young redhead says the two of them don't seem like the type to have the guts to betray the organization. Whirling her hair, the girl with bangs curses Volk, who promised they'd go to Earth X together. Suddenly, a guy with a scar on his mouth tells everyone to shut up and says that how they deal with traitors is the boss's decision. Smiling, the organization's leader says she's enjoying herself and is also surprised by the disappearances. Then asks if anyone else has something to say, or if it would be better to settle things with a deadly free-for-all to decide who gets to execute the traitors. All the other members remain silent until someone turns and tells the boss to stop trying to be funny since she's terrible at it. Black Mamba says they can schedule the executions. The problem is that the traitors know the time and place of the meetings. Mocking, another hooded figure asks if that creature really thinks those two nobodies can actually do anything. Suddenly, a voice announces that an unknown movement has been detected on routes 1 through 5. Still smiling, the leader says, "Speak of the devil," and he appears. Everyone begins preparing to contain the threat while complaining about how annoying the situation is. Sipping his tea, Mom says they should finish this quickly so the meeting can begin. The redhead asks if he and the other girl aren't going to help. They both say no because they don't like dealing with insignificant beings. Inside the ventilation system, Jungle watches as the leader says they should have asked to bring the intruders' heads for identification. Thinking, he says he's never even won a lottery ticket and wonders why he's suddenly so lucky. We go back 30 minutes earlier when Sue's team arrived at the meeting location. Red Ghost explains that there are 5 entrances, each equipped with an intruder detection sensor. They're also the only way in or out, and all paths lead to the main meeting hall. After thinking for a moment, the protagonist says that means they need one person at each entrance to prevent the Grood from escaping. Turning around, he asks if Jungu brought the radios. He quickly says yes. Our boy then says each person should go through a separate passage, and if they run into someone too strong, just call him on the radio, especially if that someone is Black Man Bad. After entering, the HMCS team leader says that part went smoothly, but after his entrance the path got blocked, which forced him to find the nearest air duct. That way, without fighting even once, he ended up arriving first at the central main hall, where all the seemingly high-level members are. Sweeting bullets, the man concludes that since 5 members left, fights must be happening everywhere. So instead of calling the team, it'd be better if he just starts the battle. Suddenly, Hedgehog finds a small ball inside the meeting hall and moves in to pick up the item. But unfortunately for him, a massive explosion goes off. Without getting up, Crow says the girl is dead, while Mambi says that apparently a little rat managed to sneak in. Suddenly, a grenade also drops from the ceiling. But Black manages to throw the object far away, stating that he doesn't enjoy playing hide-and-seek. With the impact of the explosion, Jungu ends up falling from the air duct. He tries to attack before hitting the ground, defending himself. The creature quickly realizes the man is a hunter from HMCS. After landing, the team leader notes that he only managed to take down 1 member and wonders who the hell the hooded one still sitting there is. Placing a hand on his head, Black asks if the traitors really handed him over to him. Nervous, Jane questions what would happen if they actually did. The creature says it would be impressed since the men chose to side with weaklings. The protagonist team leader becomes furious and strikes a blow, sending small knives flying toward the enemy. While sipping tea, Crow says that attack wasn't half bad. With a cut on his cheek, Mambi says he had forgotten about the man's ability, which allows him to use telekinesis. Thinking to himself, Jungu becomes concerned about how tough his opponent's skin is. Charging forward, Black says this fight will be enough for a warm-up, then hurls the team leader against one of the walls with full force. The creature says it didn't want to leave handprints on the man's vital organs and asks Crow if it can finish the job. Grabbing the radio, the protagonist team leader alerts the others about what happened. But suddenly, he gets kicked by Black, who without removing his foot, says the man seems to be running a bit late. Speaking the names of the traitors, the creature asks who's next. But to its surprise, the entire team appears. Without turning around, Black seems unaware he's about to be attacked from behind. Suddenly, a huge explosion occurs. Flying backward, the creature says that was quite unexpected, referring to the fact that the team handled the other members so well they managed to get there. Mumbai says Crow must be pretty disappointed, and she agrees, saying she thought she had chosen useful people. The snake then says something still feels off because, judging by the wounds on the invaders' bodies, it's clear a fight took place, which means Tiger or Grizzly weren't defeated that easily. Black lands a blow, sending debris flying everywhere. Charging in, Shu says he's talking too much for a damn assassin. Mombai then asks if the guy isn't from the White Lion Guild, and throwing the hunter far away questions what he's doing there if he's not part of HMCS. Shu crashes hard into Junggu and apologizes. The fawn creature says that no matter how it looks at it, the situation doesn't make sense because everyone is so uncoordinated as if they met just yesterday, meaning they're not an organization. Elsewhere, Wolverine asks who Sue is. With his back turned, our boy says he's the one who brought everyone together. Surprised, Junggu asks how Chu got there so quickly, and he says he ran the moment he heard the call. Since Sue said he'd take care of the other enemies alone, that's why they now need to keep the target inside until the boy arrives. Attacking, Volk asks if the two really think they can hold off an Awaken A rank by barely trying. Red Ghost says he hasn't even used his ability yet, but something in that room feels off. Thinking he concludes the group must have set up some sort of mechanism since Crow is calmly observing. And since it's impossible to gauge her abilities, predicting what will happen is out of the question. Using his staff, the old man announces he'll take care of the organization's leader while the others handle Black. Being attacked, Mombai asks if no one is going to answer his questions. Showing that they won't, Ghost says no one is leaving that room until the master arrives. He decides to use his binding information ability, causing chains to appear around the hooded figures. Without getting up, Crow asks if this is serious. The old man then says that not even someone as highly ranked as her can escape that easily. Laughing, the leader of Bestia says the man's boss must be someone very powerful for him to be so confident. Focused on Crow, Ghost doesn't notice. The hedgehog has woken up and stood. With the attack, Volk and Junggu run toward the bald man. The chains around Black begin to vanish, and he says, continuing, "This is just a waste of time. After all, they're quite busy and don't know when reinforcements will arrive. So, it's going to make sure Chu dies as fast as possible." While he speaks, Mombai activates his ability called Draconian. Jang, who says he'll cover the hunter's rear, but the latter tells him that since he's injured, he should stay put. Suddenly, Black attacks with his massive tail, forcing the men to leap for cover. Thinking to himself, Chu says the creature's mana density is extremely high, and apparently, the group is using the room as a trap, which means all he can do is buy time, especially because the other members are also fighting and can't provide support. Black prepares to deliver a deadly punch. But suddenly, something hits his arm hard, making him pull back. We see that the knife was thrown by Junggu. The attack enrages Manny to the point that he roars, causing stones to start falling from the ceiling toward the team. Shook is distracted while warning the team leader that he's about to be hit, and takes a blow that sends him flying backward. Appearing behind Bamboo, Black says that hunters who walk in the light are often deluded since a skill's ranking, the amount of mana, or numbers don't determine victory or defeat. Then he asks if the man really thought they wouldn't prepare the place for an attack. Vyoji is struck directly while Mombai reveals that the entire conference hall is equipped with self-destruction mechanisms, which means once you enter the snake's den, there's no way out alive. So, the brown hair man should stop resisting and just die quietly. Grabbing Jongvu by the neck, Black prepares to end his life. But another explosion happens and throws him backward. Running in, Sue decides to show how it's done and lands a punch on the creature's neck. With a dark expression on his face, the protagonist says he finally found him. Giving up on killing Volk, Hedgehog charges in and asks who the boy is. Without answering, our boy attacks the girl with his shockwave ability. Still watching everything, Crow asks if the boy reverse-engineered all the magic circles set up in that space. Fry shouts that it was only possible because of him. After all, so too slow. After getting up, the team leader says it's impressive how he turned the whole facility into paper. Getting ready to break free. Black says the boy's entrance startled him a bit, but now he finally understands that it was the boy who exterminated the other organization members and planned the entire operation with a hand on his head. Sumu says the one responsible for everything is the Snake Man. Surprised, Crow asks what kind of mess Mom got into to be hunted down. He says he doesn't know either since he just follows orders, but he's starting to realize this is all about revenge. Black then states that it doesn't matter who he's killed. He's never left a trace, but admits the boy is impressive. Activating his power, the protagonist says he'll have his revenge. But first, there's something he needs to find out. The creature starts getting surrounded by flames. Crow extends her hand and tries to intervene, but is stopped by Ghost, who tells her to pay attention to what the third legend is about to say. Raising her hands, the leader of the Bestas says she had no intention of interfering and asks what made the old man so loyal to the boy and who the hell he even is. Trying to defend himself from the attack, Mambi thinks that the magic circles that boosted buffs were turned into traps and wonders if Sue has some kind of tracking ability and why he's so fast and powerful. Our boy gains momentum and throws the creature against the wall, falling to the ground while coughing up strawberry juice. Black laughs, and says he's never met anyone like the young man. And even though he prides himself on knowing nearly everything about elite hunters, he'd like to know who the boy is and what he wants so badly that he'd go that far. Blocking the attack like it was nothing, Sue steps on Mambi's back and says he misunderstood everything. After all, he's the one asking questions here. Stepping on the snake's head, the protagonist says that with a single wrong move, he can kill her, so she better shut up. Wounded Black says fine. Our boy grabs the creature by the face and tells him to speak louder, then asks who ordered Minjin's assassination. In his thoughts, Mambi is shocked to realize all of this is because of the historian. Smiling, he says now he's starting to understand. The protagonist tells him to confess if he wants to live. Grabbing Sue's hand, Lax says the boy is right. But even if he says what the boy wants to hear, how does he plan to listen if his ears are going to be melted? We see the creature took the opportunity to spit venom from its mouth. Mambi then says that the first rule of an assassin is to never reveal the client. Coughing, the protagonist asks how the hell he just spat in his face. And healing himself, he says he's going to make the creature talk. With wide eyes, Black wonders why the hell he's dealing with a healer. He then decides to ask Crow for help. With her hands raised, she says she's surrounded. Stammering, Black says he'll tell the boy what he wants to know, quickly revealing that the client is P&D. Before finishing, the creature simply explodes, but Sue seems to have understood that it was pandemonium. Suddenly, the leader of the Besh's eyes turn red, and she quickly takes out the team members around her. Removing her hood, she says that now she knows that the boy is Mad Dogi Men Siwu, a first-generation hunter who disappeared 10 years ago. Staring at the young woman with a firm gaze, our boy asks if she's also working with Pandemonium. Crow says no because her organization is basically a guild of assassins, so they don't get involved in personal contracts. She then reveals that she figured out who the protagonist was because her sister once spoke about a hunter with a strange healing ability. Sue asks if she really doesn't know anything or if she's lying. Floating, the girl says she's telling the truth, and since he already knows so much about her, he should believe her. The leader asks Hedgehog to stand up, while saying it's strange that she forgot Sue even existed. Using her power, she causes another explosion, which opens a hole in the ceiling. Leaving with her ally, Crow asks if Sue is going to follow them. Looking up, our boy says no because he already has everything he needs. The girl then says, in that case, they'll meet again soon. Shu approaches and asks why the protagonist let the girls go, and he says it was that or end up buried in rubble. And since for now they've achieved their objective, they should focus on cleanup, which in this case is up to Junggu. Looking at Black's body, he wonders what the hell Minjin discovered to be assassinated. A few days later, Sue still can't forget the name Pandemonium. Researching, he says that 20 years ago, the first gate opened on Earth, and all kinds of things came through it, including mana, monsters, magic stones, countless rare resources, and demons, a race from another dimension naturally skilled in mana manipulation and specialized in abilities like awakened beings. We learned that after the first gate appeared, the creatures took advantage of the chaos to enter Earth. And besides taking control of the gates, they also treated humanity as an inferior species, building the Demon King's castle right in the middle of the continent. And that's when a group of treacherous humans swore loyalty to King Pandemonium. However, the creature's reign didn't last long since the first generation of hunters held them off. Thus, when the war broke out between humanity and the demons for survival on Earth, the humans came out victorious. And it was in the middle of that war that Sue was thrown into the rift. Thinking, he says that Pandemonium had already been defeated before the war ended, but now his name has suddenly resurfaced. Our boy decides to call for Free, who quickly responds. He then asks if demons also existed in the world they were in before, just with a different appearance. The parasite confirms and says that among the many races he encountered, demons are the most scattered across all dimensions. Sue says that even in that world, the creatures dominated and exploited other species, and he asks if they always act like that. Free says he's not sure because before meeting the boy, he had no memories and all that remained was a feeling of having had something stolen by demons. But after encountering them for 100 years, he can confirm they're exactly the kind of bastards capable of doing anything. Impatient, Subu says that 10 years ago, he was focused on killing demons instead of gathering more information. And all he knows is that the creature's mana pattern is different from humans and that they got very good at imitating them. Free asks why the protagonist doesn't just kill them all to solve the problem. But our boy says it's not that simple. Sejuan enters the room and says that since his brother arrived early, he'd like to ask what kind of trouble he caused to have ended up renting an office. Shu says he was only after answers about what happened to Minjin. But the guy with glasses says that Huang told him he wiped out an entire assassin organization. So he demands to know who the boy is hiding in the office. Even after repeatedly saying it was necessary to be discreet, pouting, Su says Bungu really has a big mouth. Then he asks Sun not to worry because he plans to pay a visit to the president soon since there are still many unanswered questions, and if he confronts the man directly, he might prevent him from taking any unnecessary action. Worried, the young man with glasses says his brother hasn't even fully recovered yet. But in any case, he won't force him to stop, even knowing he might end up in danger again. Still jokingly puts Sijin in a headlock and says he worries too much and is acting like their dad. Pulling away, the guy says the protagonist has to keep his promise and in exchange for the office be responsible for training the guild's new recruits because Hunter Shin's ability is more complicated than they thought and it would be good to have someone experienced take a look at the girl. Scratching his ear, our boy says he'll do it, but first they should go out to eat. Saijun asks if the boy is a walking black hole considering he just had dinner. Free says he's hungry too and asks for chicken. The protagonist then says he's pretty sure Free is the reason his stomach is empty. Jenga calls and asks if Su really wants his name kept off the case. And knowing the protagonist tells the man to watch his tone because he already ratted him out to Saigon. The team leader says the boy doesn't understand how big the incident is as now all media outlets want more information to the point that the team members are overwhelmed by the flood of calls. Django also says the branch director has been watching them closely since the G incident all because the boy left his name out. Stu asks if that means he's getting results. Desperate, the leader says that's not the point. The protagonist suggests he just say he got help from the White Lion Guild, but the man says he already contacted the organization. And, considering the recent prison break incident, it would be better if the boy changed his mind. Our boy says no one informs him he's eating, so he's hanging up, leaving the room. He says unbelievable things just keep happening. Sai asks if that was team leader Huang on the call, and, confirming it, the protagonist says he really loves his job. He then asks what the latest news on the demons is. According to his brother, the young man says that since the disappearance of the 4 demon lords, the creatures proposed a peace treaty and afterward created an institute in the polar continent to research the mana that infiltrated Earth, causing no problems since then. That's why it's rare to see demons outside the polar continent, to point that children believe the creatures are just urban legends. Sue reflects on the information about the peace treaty. Fry then says that has to be a lie since a demon would never be a lover of peace. Our boy says he feels the same way, but also senses that not all demons may be the same, just like humans. Especially since Crow had a mana pattern similar to a demon's, but might still be different. Sumo wonders if a human-demon hybrid could exist, and then states that in the beginning this was all about avenging Minjin. But the Morty follows the man's trail. The Morty feels this fight will last far longer than expected. Meanwhile, in the polar continent, we see that Minjan is more than alive. Back at the office Sue rented inside, he tells Volk and Red to focus on circulating mana through their bodies while becoming aware of their dancing. Confused, Chu asks what the hell a dancing is, then says that just sitting there and meditating won't help him increase his output. Annoyed, our boy says they begged him to train them, and now that's what he gets, and asks why nowadays everyone is just blowing things up without even understanding how mana control works. VOG asks if it's really necessary to do all that when you're already strong. In response, the protagonist says that just because he awakened his first skill inside an artificial portal, he thinks he knows everything that he doesn't even realize that the power difference depends entirely on how you burn the fuel called mana. So, he'll explain it just once. Shu says that when a human feels mana for the first time, the storage space opens inside the body, which is where mana gathers. This place, along with the power it generates, is what's called the Danshin, which when awakened, according to an individual's characteristics, manifests externally as abilities. That's why the density of an ability depends on how efficiently someone can control mana in their Danshin. Thus, for continuous training, the Danshin's capacity expands, allowing for greater mana storage, which makes understanding its essence fundamental, especially for beginners. And the best way to do that is through meditation. So, everyone should shut up and focus. Once the explanation ends, our boy says that the next day, he's going to push everyone's bodies to the brink of death. Suddenly, Junga shows up at the door and asks if the protagonist knows how long he's been looking for him. With no one answering his calls, Sumu says the man is starting to sound like a stalker, but the team leader says the branch director wants to see the boy. Sometime later, outside HMC's headquarters, the protagonist asks why the branch director is looking for him and if Jungvu was the one who turned him in. The man says no, and maybe the director wants to talk about the prison incident. A bit further ahead, 2 people stop in front of the pair. They're still on Changwon, leader of the Gangnam team, and Haj, senior agent of the team. Irritated, Django asks why the man is already back from his trip, saying it would have been better if he had returned quietly instead of picking fights with random people. Mocking, Sayong says he just said hi and asks if the boy next to him is the rookie who stirred up trouble. Turning red with rage, The protagonist team leader says he'll let the nonsense slide because of jet lag. Joining the conversation, Jumpy says their trip was to Japan, which means there's no need to adjust to jet lag. Tells the boy to leave the pair alone. After all, it must be frustrating to not even be able to catch weak awakened ones. The boy with glasses calls out to Sue and asks why he hasn't introduced himself since he's standing in front of higher-ranking members from another team. Flipping them off, our boy says that's his greeting and asks why the two don't just move out of the way since they apparently haven't noticed how wide they are even with the guy wearing glasses. Chunk lets out a nervous laugh and, activating his power, says he's going to teach the disrespectful rookie a lesson. Jungo asks if the guy's brain isn't working properly since he can't separate business from personal grudges. Cyan then questions who the man thinks he is to be lecturing his subordinate, and if he didn't hear what Sue said. The protagonist ally says that apparently the one who didn't hear was him. Mocking our boy says is probably because the man's ears are clogged with fat. Furious, the guy in the purple shirt asks if he should teach him the lesson since the entire headquarters team is watching and take the opportunity to show who's really in charge around here. Suddenly, a hand grabs shoulder. It's Jin who apologizes and says that he's the one in charge. The two troublemakers are left speechless upon seeing the branch director. Without saying another word to the duo, the man says he now understands why Sue was late and that Django should have done something. Then hang our boy. He asks if he likes tea. Cyan yells and asks the director to wait a minute. Turning around, John says he heard rumors that the man was requesting extra services during the mission in Japan. So if he wants to be a great hunter, he should start by doing his own job instead of wasting time with nonsense. Puzzle. The other team leader asks who the hell that rookie is. But Jumpy says he has no idea. Inside the director's office, the man comments that this is the first time he's meeting Sue in person. Armoy agrees and asks why he was called there. Smiling, Jin says he likes straightforward people and that he called him there because